You might not like what I did with the Vibe Bus. This isn't a tutorial on what you need to do. This isn't something on why your mixes suck and mine are awesome. That's all BS. We should be always looking for ways to incorporate our taste and our sensibilities. People aren't listening for perfect. People are listening for personality. When we talk about top-down mixing today, most people describe it as starting with your mix bus and working down into tracks. But the truth is, in the analog world, top-down wasn't a technique. It was just a reality. From the first press of play, your mix was already running through tape, hitting transformers, bleeding across channels with crosstalk, and living inside the circuitry of a console. Every fader move, every EQ twist was happening inside that colored environment. The console itself was an instrument. In digital, things are a bit different. If you just start by EQing tracks in isolation, you're actually working bottom up, stacking clean, sterile sounds before ever giving them a shared sonic identity. And that is why so many mixes can sometimes feel flat, disconnected, or overly processed. So buckle up, grab your notepad, because we're going to rethink top-down mixing for the digital age. We're going to talk about crosstalk, iron, headroom, saturation, and all the hidden ingredients that make analog records feel alive. And then I'm going to show you how to build a vibe bus that recreates that same magic inside your DAW, so your mixes breathe like music and not math. What's up, everybody? Today I'm really excited to talk to you about a 2-bus path that I've been using now for about a year that I've really loved. I've been getting great feedback from my clients and feel it's really kind of helped me create a new workflow that has me using less plugins overall, and also feeling like when I'm mixing, it's more like me. And basically every year I like to take a break from what I'm doing and rethink some of my methods, where I can save time, where I can look to interject more of my personality. This is especially after working on many mixes and feeling like I have, limitations that I'm running into, or doing a lot of listening and my ear developing more taste and sensibility than, say, it had the year before. But before we get started with all this, the first thing we have to ask ourselves whenever we're mixing and looking to kind of evolve our sound or mix a record is the what and why. And the first is, what kind of record are we trying to make? See, something that gets kind of glossed over in all the nostalgia of sounds like a record is that every single era redefined what a record was. We heard the Beatles constantly trying to chase that Motown sound. Once 80s DJs started chopping up drum samples and working with already EQ'd and compressed and hard-hitting sounds, all of a sudden drummers from rock and other genres wanted their drums to sound the same. So a lot of times culture drives the sonics, and it's important for us to know what type of record we're making, because that phrase, "it sounds like a record," is really subjective. Like if I told you, think of a dog. Are you thinking about Snoopy? Are you thinking about Scooby-Doo? Are you thinking about your neighbor's Labradoodle? So see, just the concept of record or think of something can be very subjective, and often it's our tastes that dictate those sensibilities to us. So for today's purposes, we're going to think about some of the classic analog sound. When most of records were mixed, say, through an analog console or through a typical analog chain, which was the multi-tracks feeding into a tape machine, which fed into a console, and console summing with all that phase introduced through crosstalk and transformers, and then moving out into some special selected secret weapon outboard pieces of gear that each mixer would have as their finishing pieces, and then often back into tape for the final print. So we're going to think about that kind of signal path, and I'm going to show you how instead of having one final bus, I've actually split mine into 3, which is a vibe bus, a finish bus, and a print bus. And my vibe bus essentially is my console. And we're going to hop inside the DAW right now, and I'm going to show you the fundamentals that I use to create that. And instead of you taking a carbon copy of what I did, well, you can if you want. But really the goal of today's video is to teach you how to craft your own. That'll give you something exciting to mix into that'll help you feel like you're creating your own sound. So let's get going. We can think of the vibe bus as an identity engine. It's not about transparency, it's about personality.
It's my personality that has gotten us this far.
And people don't listen for correct, they listen for character and emotion. And for me, the vibe bus is designed to do that. So I'm going to set up a quick little loop here of a track I have pulled up. And what I did was I printed a version of this track just from the raw multi-tracks. So if I scroll up here, we can see that all these plugins were put on during the recording phase. And all of those are feeding into these 3 auxes here. And we're going to do a video on how I set these up and process these, as these are the first collectors. And then they feed into the vibe bus. And that is my console. The vibe bus feeds into this master bus that I call my finishing bus. And then I always print back into my session. It makes it easier for revisions and it makes it easier for me to understand where I'm at. But when we look at the vibe bus, what we're trying to recreate in this case is an analog signal path, but also something that is customized for me. So it's going to embrace some of the traditional kind of analog glue and transient smear, but then also if I was, able to construct a console myself or had some super whiz that was constructing a console and I was able to add some custom features to it, this channel right here is essentially my console.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody who hurt me, but not quite badly enough for your own verse and chorus. Now we're all here together so you can be friends and talk about, I don't know, fishing? I'm not petty and you're not Tom Petty, but I wish you were free falling out of my life. And I'm not sorry, gonna hide your body if you ever try to pull shit like that on me twice.
But that's pretty interesting. The raw one, it sounds like the whole lower mids have a cold and we're missing some of that low end punch and definition in the bass drum, and we'd immediately start going to work on the bass drum. Where here in the vibe bus, I definitely feel like that kick is sounding nice. We could carve it up a little bit more. The snare we could probably push a little bit more in the mix, and we would also have a great idea of where we need to go for parallel compression. The guitars in the vibe bus, much more definition, same with the cymbals, and you can notice that mostly in the accents, the boom, bap, boom, bap part in the end. You could hear the band lock in more and more clarity when that was all running through the vibe bus, where we now might have been going, if we were just listening through the raw and doing, say, a bottom-up mixing, we'd be kind of carving up all those instruments a little bit to get that definition that we could naturally get from some of the non-linear behavior of our vibe bus processing. So whether or not you love the vibe bus I constructed, let's talk about how you can put a vibe bus of your own together. And I would always start with some sort of trim plugin at the top, because that is going to allow you some, leeway with your gain staging. Then if you're trying to follow a typical analog path, some sort of tape emulator that would give you a little bit of transient smear, some head bump, then some top end roll off, and then maybe also a little hysteresis. So you're going to get some of that, kind of like nice transient smearing. I would look for a console emulator or a summing emulator that you love that gives you some of the weight of the iron and the circuitry that would be in a console. If you don't want to use a console emulator, you could also use something like True Iron and pick a particular transformer that you like, or Kush has some different transformer emulators. You could put something like that on and find one that you like to dial in and you like the way that your mix sounds running through it. From there, I would look to process some sort of transient shaper that sets the tone for your mix, so essentially a bus compressor. And I use the API, but again, you could use or try an SSL, try a Neve. You could get crazy. You could put a devil lock on there if you wanted to. I mean, be as crazy as you want. It's your sensibility. It's your mix. And then from there, an EQ that gives you some tone sculpting, not problem solving. And from there, I think that's a great start for any vibe bus. But if you have things that you like, or if you find that there are certain things taste-wise that for you draw in your sensibilities, that's where I start putting these, kind of those modern flares. So that's where I went with Culture Vulture, which was my exciter and saturator. And then I went with something mid-side with a nice modern toy that can give me some punch down the center, but also a little bit of width on the sides without having to do too much of that individually. And then I have this little automation trick that I like to use for my kind of snare crack and like vocal sibilance in dense parts of a song. You might say, well, EJ, like, how do I develop this? I'm just starting and this might feel a little bit over my head. Okay, well, the first thing I would say to do is reference and reflect. So listen to as much music as you possibly can and reference it against the mixes that you've done so far. And if you're not mixing yet, then just listen and ask yourself this question: what do I like about this mix? And if you're referencing it against one of your own, what do I like about this mix that I don't hear in my mix? And write these things down. take note of them and really reflect, because that's the problem that we make is we might say, oh man, I love Andrew Scheps' mixes. They're just so big, right? But do we get detailed enough to really say, I actually really like A, B, C, or D about his mix, and start to drill down with what it is that we're noticing when especially when we're comparing it to your mix. There's something about the bite of his guitars that's different than mine, or there's something about the way his snare drum sits, or whatever it might be. So it's about referencing and reflecting. And then the next thing is about experimenting with extremes. So when I said I found settings that worked for me, what I did was I pulled up each one of these plugins one at a time, and I would run a mix through it and push it. And I'd find the spot where everything started to become ugly. I found out where ugly lived so that I know where, for me, beauty and taste lives. And then I also know if I need to make it ugly, where I need to go. So you have to know how to push these things. And the only way you do that is by experimenting with them. If you just kind of slap it on and slap on a preset, you really aren't learning anything about the plugin. So take it, mess with it, find out where it's ugly, find out where it's beautiful, find out things about it that you don't know. And then that's how you're really going to understand the capabilities of what it is you're working with and how it can fit into your taste. And then last, you have to create a record of your influences. That's really what taste is, right? It's a record of your influences. So you have to be very intentional about what you love. And being intentional about what you love kind of ties in what I said about referencing and reflecting. It's being very, very articulate about understanding this is what I feel I'm lacking. And this is what I feel when I listen to other people's music, what I feel they're doing exceptionally well. And be highly as specific as you can. Now, when you're applying these, in addition to developing your taste and understanding what plugins to use to design your own custom console, listening is also very important. And here's my recommendations for listening. First, don't try to hear everything at once. Listen through and listen to the low end. And listen to whatever it is you're applying, what it's doing to the low end. And take careful note of the low end. Then repeat for the mid-range. And then repeat for the top end. And take note of what you like and what you don't like, especially as you're working through different parameters. The second thing is to work at different volumes. Listen loud to what you're doing for a moment and see what level of excitement it does and what happens to the low end. Does the low end become too unruly? Does it hit the right way? How are our transients punching loud? And then listen very soft and see where it's easier to hear if you're dealing with any sort of major masking issues, or if there's more crunch or distortion or saturation on something that at really high volumes you might not hear. So for example, with the Culture Vulture, if you're really pushing it and you have the volume dimed, you might be like, man, this sounds phenomenal, it sounds exciting, it sounds energetic, but then all of a sudden you listen really low and it sounds like there's this whole layer of distortion going across the top of the mix. Everything feels too crunchy, too crispy. And that's the benefit of listening low. So the first thing I start with is a trim. Now, you might not always need a trim if once you get the gain staging of everything following this right, you wouldn't really have to worry too much. Having a trim here allows me to control the whole entire sound of the console without having to go through each individual plugin. Now, the first one that I put on is a tape machine. Now, I guess if we were going for like a super tried and true sound, maybe we'd use like a Studer or like a multi-track, and that would be feeding into our console. But since we get to kind of customize our own console, I decided that I wanted the flexibility of the ATR here where I could switch between different tape sizes and still have the same tape formulas and calibrations from, say, the Studer. Now, with a song like this, I'm going to lean on the 250 with that little bit more vintagey vibe, calibrated properly at +3, and I like the 1/2 inch. If you're not really understanding much about the different tape formulas, my friends, we did a video maybe about a month and a half ago where I broke all this down. I would highly encourage you to go check that out. I'm going to use 15 IPS, which I love, and then I just kind of keep this stuff pretty standard. So I take the hiss and hum off, have the transformer in, crosstalk in, and kind of away we go. Remember, with tape, we're going to get a head bump, and we're going to get a little bit of high frequency roll off, some saturation, a little bit of hysteresis, which is kind of that smearing of transients. So the easiest one to notice off the rip is going to be the low end.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted.
So we can already hear that kick drum and low end tighten up a little bit. And also a little bit of like some nice detail in the mid-range, like a little bit kind of cleaned up. So now the next thing is a console. Now you might be saying, hey man, like, do you need to do all this? Can't you just slap like a Slate digital console emulation on or something like that? The CLA one for Waves, and you absolutely can. But where I'm coming from and what the purpose of the Vibe Bus is that we all can do that. So if we all take Slate, pop it on the same thing, we're all gonna have a general same vibe. Where here, we're able to kind of customize a sound. And for me, that was really important. Like I really wanted to feel like I was able to turn around and create something that is unique to what I want to do. And that led me on a search to kind of find some plugins that I don't really see used as much as others. And this Sonomus is one that I fell in love with. And they actually have several different console emulations that emulate different famous consoles. And one of the things that we're going to get from this is, in addition to the irons, so the transformers that were used that are going to help to kind of roll off some of the subsonics, to tighten up and bring into focus a little bit of the mid-range, is also what's called crosstalk. Now, if you're not familiar with crosstalk, what crosstalk is back in kind of the analog console time, each channel would get a little bit of bleed from the other channel. So think of it like this. If you took everything that you had in your mix that was panned to the right and you sent a copy of that to the left channel, and you say filtered out all the lows, so it was just a very tinny and high frequency version of everything in the right channel that you were feeding into the left channel at, like, say 17 to 20 decibels lower, that's what crosstalk is. And also it'd be whatever's in the center channel, because remember, there is no such thing as an actual mono channel unless you're working in Dolby Atmos where you actually have a mono speaker. The phantom center is just equal signal on both sides. So your right channel would be, you know, your center and your right information, and we've taken a copy of that and sending it to the left. Now, what happens is in certain designs, you would get phase issues. Now, that phase issue, depending on where they existed, could help all of a sudden add stereo width to what's going on. You might have wondered sometimes if you take stereo plugins, or if you take, you know, a guitar track or something like that, and you pan it or make a duplicate of it and put one out of phase on one side, you get this like extra wide sound. So that's what crosstalk is. And a lot of crosstalk, especially with like Neves and things like that, when they were designed for the kind of low mids to be in phase. So that'd be very tight and punchy. And then some of the upper frequencies would be a little bit out of phase where you get some smearing, but it would give you a little bit of like sense of stereo width and depth, which is actually really cool and something that we like.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody.
Now, I'm not sure if you can hear the difference, but let me guide your ear to something on this. The bass drum I felt was pretty noticeable because, again, we're working with that Neve where we're going to get that nice low bump. So already between the tape and the Neve, I'm getting a lot with my bass drum. But listen to the guitars and kind of listen to where the guitar feels. The guitars feel like they are in the stereo field when this is bypassed. And then when it's engaged, how it feels like they get a little bit wider. And also we're starting to hear a little bit more of that detail.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial.
So you can hear the snare starting to pop a little bit more, but you can also hear the guitars kind of widen out a little bit. And the vocal feels a little cleaner and a little bit more forward. Next, I have an API 2500 compressor setup, which would almost be like a bus compressor. Yes, this serves as my bus compressor, but in my opinion, what it's also helping me do is it's setting the tone for the transients of my mix. It's helping me determine the punch that I want. Next, I have a PULTECH. What this is for me is it's tone painting. It's not problem solving. And this is not something that I really look to go in and tweak. Again, I consider this almost like the sound of my console. So I'm not going in and looking to really kind of tweak this. It's like if somebody was saying, hey, you know, how do you want your console to respond? I said, well, you know, it'd be awesome if I can get like a little bump around 100 and a little bump around 10K naturally with what's, you know, with what's kind of feeding through. And they were like, great. If you are unfamiliar with the API or different compressors and different EQs, check out some of the previous videos that we made where I talked about typology, compressor typology, and also EQ typology. This is kind of like, this video is kind of like one of our Mr. Miyagi wax on, wax off moments.
Wax on, wax off.
Where all these other videos that we had where we're discussing this stuff, now I'm kind of showing you like how I like to use a lot of this stuff in my real world mixing applications.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody who hurt me but not quite badly enough for your own verse and chorus. Now we're all here together so you can be friends and talk about, I don't know, fishing?
And that right there is your smiley face EQ. It gives the top end the nice lift. I'm hearing the top of the snare. I'm hearing the cymbals step forward. I'm hearing a little bit more of the clarity in the vocal, like all good stuff. Next up would be what I would consider to be like my first like custom insert, and that is the Culture Vulture. Now, I've watched a lot of phenomenal mix engineers use the real version in some creative ways, and I've watched engineers like Sean Everett and also Chad Blake set this up and use it to kind of dial in a saturation vibe on their mix buses. So for me, this is essentially like the magic in my console, something that I can drive into if I feel like I'm listening to the song, and before I even start getting into the multi-tracks, I feel like I need a more aggressive tone setter, like the band is angrier or driving harder into what they're doing. I can play with the drive knob. So this is a spot that I like to start. It's got some grit to it, but I like gritty, and I usually will mix throughout my chain with a lot of saturation. So having this here helped me create something that felt a little more cohesive, a little more glued together.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody who hurt me, but not quite badly enough for your own verse and chorus. Now we're all here together so you can be friends and talk about.
I hear it in the cymbals. The cymbals are now starting to come to life a little bit, like they're starting to cut through and have a little space and definition in their own. Okay, this is the two that, in my opinion, is me trying to now embrace modern technology. What I was saying, where we heard stories about every era trying to fight against their limitations or say, hey, how can we use whatever technology we have available to us right now to the greatest extent possible? And the first for me is this BX Saturator. Now, there's probably a lot of different plugins you can use, because I'm not really using this in the true sense of saturating. What I'm actually using it for is some mid-side sculpting. Now, what I'm getting here is this is actually helping me to get some punch and drive down the middle with a little bit of width. I mean, literally, like here, I can go in if I want, and I can tweak this up a little bit and actually gain up my sides some, but I usually just have it like just a little bit higher than my mids. But this is to give my mids just a little bit of punch, and then I can go in if I want during a song and actually automate my side. And that's modern technology and a trick that we can do to kind of get a little bit of width or a little bit of sparkle in a section of a song and not have to, jump through hoops and try and, over process individual tracks to do that.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody who hurt me, but not quite badly enough for your own verse and chorus. Now we're all here together.
It's a game of inches, right? Like, we haven't touched one of these. We haven't done anything. We've literally just taken the plug-in and put it on. Now, this last one, again, this would be the most modern thing. I'm sure somebody somewhere has done this, so I'm not going to call this like my patented whatever. This isn't my browerizing. But what I actually do is I put on a Pro MB. I sidechain it to my snare drum. I use 13 because 13 is my favorite number. And I have both of these set to expand. If it's an aggressive song all the way through, I leave it on the entire time. If it's not, I actually automate this on in the choruses so that I don't lose the crack of my snare and that vocal sibilance in the choruses when a lot of other things tend to get more frenetic. Guitars start stepping on stomp pedals, the bass might start driving harder, the drummer might start smashing cymbals more, and I don't want to lose my snare definition or my vocal sibilance. So it kind of keys off the snare so that those moments when the snare's hitting, everything still feels big and exciting.
This one goes out to all the guys who gave me reasons to hold a grudge. I'll look you in the proverbial eye, say no thanks to you, I'm well adjusted. To anybody who hurt me, but not quite badly enough for your own verse and chorus. Now we're all here together so you can be friends and...
So that is the entire vibe bus. Now, what I would have done if we were together, say in like a mentoring session, where I'll do with a lot of engineers that come to me for, some coaching and stuff. And I would tell you to take out a pen and paper. You're the mix engineer and you're sitting down and you're hearing your multi-tracks being played back to you right now. And as you are, you have to start determining where you need to go to make this mix work, make this mix come to life, what you're going to do. If you don't, then that's a whole other conversation and you're probably sunk if you just start twisting stuff. So ideally, you'd be pulling your multi-track up, you'd be labeling your session. As you're labeling your session, you'd be listening and formulating a plan of, okay, I need more kick energy, or I need more aggression in the vocal, or I need bigger sounding guitars, whatever it might be. You might not like what I did with the vibe bus. And that's the beauty of this, because this vibe bus is my sensibility. So you might hear this and go, oof, I don't like that. But that's the reason that some engineers would book out a Neve room versus an API room versus an SSL room. We all have different tastes. So this isn't about looking at what I'm stacking up here and approving or disapproving of what I'm doing. If you like it, gratis. Borrow as much as you want, take as much as you want. If you don't, pay attention to the philosophy here and look to experiment with your own to help create your own sound and signature. So I hope you found all this information on the Vibe Bus useful. If you start concocting formulas of your own, absolutely 100% drop it in the comments below. I'd love to know what you're up to, and I love to share ideas. That's what we're here for. This isn't a tutorial on what you need to do. This isn't something on why your mixes suck and mine are awesome, or that the fact that you're not doing this is why you don't have pro mixes. That's all BS. This is all about the fact that we should love what we do, and we should be always looking for ways to incorporate our taste and our sensibilities, because that's the only thing that we really have to bring to this, right? If it was simply about just EQing, masking frequencies, or compressing a snare drum the proper way, that's all technical information that anybody can learn, but it's how to create the song, right? How to frame it, how to add your own kind of vibe and personality to it, because again, people aren't listening for perfect, people are listening for personality. And the question becomes, where's your personality in what you're doing?